The blood-drenched body of her husband, Larry, lying on the floor.
My husband's laying in the middle of the floor and he's not moving. I don't know if he's even alive, and her husband's been ransacked. Please, hurry and get here.
Fatally taken out by a phantom killer while awaiting the opening kickoff of the big game.
He's been trying to stay away from watching Super Bowl.
The mysterious murder of Larry Fenton would shatter the seaside serenity of picturesque Clearwater, Florida, and bring a tragic end to an ill-fated marriage worthy of a Lifetime TV movie.
My husband was wonderful, perfect. I had never experienced a love like that in my life.
The midlife romance of Larry and Rebecca had unexpectedly blossomed when she was in her late 30s and he in his early 50s. And they caught each other's eye at the gym.
He looked like Clint Eastwood.
Larry was just as smitten with the beautiful and glamorous Rebecca.
And we did fall in love very quickly and started talking marriage very, very early on.
How long into your relationship did Larry propose, and how did he do it?
3 months.
3 months. This is a whirlwind romance.
We were in love. Yeah, it happened very quickly for both of us.
Did you know he was the one?
Yes, I knew.
Rebecca and Larry would soon be married in Clearwater, and then had another wedding 4 months later in Laughlin, Nevada. This time for Rebecca's friends and family members who missed the first one.
And my second wedding was that of a princess. It was the gown and the flowers and the bling and it was all of it.
And Rebecca says Larry was the handsome prince she'd been waiting for all her life. A successful architect who'd gone on to make his fortune in the surgical equipment business.
He was respected. He was humble. Didn't speak very often. When he did, he made a lot of sense, or he made a firm point.
Rebecca says he was also a perfect gentleman who treated her like royalty from the day they met.
What was it like being married to him?
I felt like the first lady. Doors were just automatically open for you.
Including those of a beautiful home Larry bought for the two of them.
I knew I had it good. I knew it was a fairy tale life.
Suddenly, the one-time nurse's aide was enjoying all the luxurious trappings of being a spoiled real housewife of Clearwater.
Oh, I didn't have to work anymore.
But after just 3 years of marriage, their dream would suddenly come crashing down one lazy Super Bowl Sunday afternoon.
He was going to order pizza, take a nap, and then get up around 6 o'clock to watch the game.
Rebecca says she went to their detached home gym to work out, never imagining she would be the last person to see Larry alive.
What is the last thing you said to your husband?
I said, I love you. I said, I love you. He said, I love you too.
Less than 2 hours later, Rebecca says she walked back into their house to find Larry lying motionless in a pool of blood on the floor of their foyer at the foot of the stairway leading to the second story.
I just remember going real hazy. I started screaming, Larry, Larry. And then I saw this pool of blood that was probably 6 inches all the way around his body,
turning his white shirt a dead red.
Did you call 911?
Not right away. I tried to take his pulse at first. And then I looked into the great room and could see that our house was in disarray. And I started yelling. I told him to hold on. I thought that Larry was okay because his eyes were open. And I ran upstairs,
where Rebecca found more rooms ransacked.
Came back down the stairs, touched him again, tousled his head a little bit, told him, hold on, honey, and I ran outside and called 911.
My husband's laying in the middle of the floor and he's not moving. I don't know if he's even alive, and her husband's been ransacked. Please, hurry and get here.
Rebecca sounds hysterical and desperate.
I think he's dead. I think my husband might be dead, but if you hurry, maybe he's alive and you can help.
Okay, ma'am, we have the rescue is responding right now.
But medics confirm Larry is indeed dead from 4 gunshot wounds to his neck and his back.
And by the time he hit the floor, the blood evidence shows that he never moved again.
It immediately appeared to police that Larry had been killed in the course of a robbery. Drawers had been pulled out and cabinet doors left open throughout the home, their contents strewn over the floors of the bedrooms and living areas. And Larry's Jeep was missing from the driveway.
At first, you believe this was
possibly a random act of violence.
Yes, initially.
But on closer examination, detectives noticed that, apart from his car, nothing of any real value had been stolen. Not even Larry's wallet, stuffed with cash.
You didn't buy it?
Didn't buy it. I started to see that this ransacking of the residence wasn't ransacking at all. There were things that were knocked over, say off bookshelves. It looked like somebody just took their hand and just knocked the books off the shelf onto the floor.
Just didn't make sense.
To what end? That doesn't accomplish anything. So as we started looking at this, I believe that this was a staged crime scene.
Then, as detectives and forensic experts are sweeping the home for more clues, Rebecca does something odd as she was speaking with cops on the sidewalk.
Rebecca was, on video, laughing and joking.
Rebecca Fenton had just reported finding her husband Larry lying shot dead in the foyer of their home in Clearwater, Florida.
There was blood everywhere. Which way they hit him.
And Rebecca is already under suspicion of being his murderer when detectives interview her at the station just hours later.
We definitely thought that some of the things she was saying and doing didn't quite add up.
They seemed suspicious of me from the beginning.
For a start, investigators find it hard to believe that any intruder would choose to break into a house on this particular day, at this particular time. Super Bowl Sunday afternoon, when most people are at home waiting to watch the big game, including Rebecca and Larry.
There are two cars in the driveway, hers and his. They're going to successfully ransack the entire place.
And investigators would see another red flag in news footage shot by a local TV crew at the crime scene.
That's when I was on the news with a smile on my face.
Looking like the proverbial merry widow while being questioned by cops on the sidewalk.
All smiles while she was still on the scene of her husband's murder.
How do you explain that?
I can't. I have no explanation for
Were
that.
you happy at that moment?
No, I wasn't happy.
Rebecca says she was reacting to a joking remark an officer had made about the crowd of onlookers gathered outside the house. But police dispute that.
The officers are not joking with her. There's a dead man inside.
Rebecca says she also may have been in shock.
That wasn't a good moment for
No,
you.
it wasn't a good moment for me, and I understand that it doesn't look good for me.
You do understand that?
I do understand that.
Detectives were also suspicious about other aspects of Larry's murder, including Rebecca's actions after she found his body.
She doesn't render aid, and then what she decides the best thing to do at that point is to run around the house. And what she said, the quote was, to see what the hell had happened.
Saying she thought her husband had been killed by robbers.
That was very, very strange. You're just discovering your husband on the ground in a pool of blood. My last thought would be, oh my gosh, I've been burglarized. My thought would be, oh my God, I need medical attention immediately.
And Rebecca is at a loss to explain it to detectives.
If I had known that I was supposed to be with him, hold him, or do CPR, then I would have. I think that I'm trying to think of what I was thinking.
Rebecca says she was afraid that whoever killed her husband might have still been in the house.
I think people handle things differently, and I think that at some point I all of a sudden got that self-preservative fear, get out of the house. Something's wrong.
And Rebecca tells detectives she did take her husband's pulse when she first found his body, and then again before she fled their home.
And was there any pulse either time?
No, but I didn't know if I was doing it right.
Did you check him for any injuries?
I looked into his eyes and I kept saying his name. I touched his head and I kept saying his name.
But that would only raise more suspicions.
How much blood was around him?
It seemed to me like a lot. It seemed like it was around his body.
Now detectives can't understand why there was no trace of that blood on Rebecca.
The blood was completely undisturbed in the pool around him and on his body, and there was absolutely no blood on her whatsoever. So I believe that it was physically impossible, based on this blood evidence, that she checked his pulse.
and they think they know why she didn't take his pulse.
She knows he's dead. She shot him.
But Rebecca says she purposely felt for Larry's pulse on his neck, not on his bloody wrist.
Show me on your neck how you tried to take his pulse.
He was laying like this, and I touched him right here. Like, was in shock, didn't even really know what I was doing. It wasn't an earnest try to get his pulse.
And she tells detectives she deliberately avoided coming into contact with any blood.
I didn't think it was wise for me to touch him, to get blood on me, to turn him over, to do anything like that. I thought that would just either make things worse for the scene. It might have incriminated me.
She said that she's seen crime scene investigation type shows on TV, and she knows from those shows that it's best not to touch anything, so that's why she didn't try to help her husband.
But detectives don't believe her, pointing to classic signs of guilt that they've uncovered in her 911 call.
I thought there was definitely something off with the 911 call.
She's just adding things that weren't being asked of her.
I think my husband's been shot. My house has been burglarized. I just walked in. I'm not getting a pulse on him. I just came in from the gym.
Detectives also think Rebecca seems too anxious to establish an alibi.
We have a gym out back, and I was working out in the gym.
During the entire 911 call, she says 8 times, "I was in the gym. I was in the gym. I was in the gym."
You didn't see any vehicles, right?
Nothing. I was working out at the gym.
And they believe she's trying too hard to convince the dispatcher she'd never kill her husband.
We love each other. This man is my life.
I understand, ma'am.
I can't live without this man.
Okay, I understand.
He loves me, and I love him. And this cannot be happening.
She is not the important one in this situation, yet she's talking about herself.
But there's something about herself that Rebecca would rather not talk about.
Do you believe Rebecca was unfaithful to Larry?
Yes, I do.
Trying to make it look like a burglar had shot Larry dead.
But we didn't want to pigeonhole ourselves or jump to the gun too quickly that, oh, the wife did it. We wanted to make sure everything was completely investigated.
So they look at all possibilities, asking Rebecca if she knew why anyone would want to kill Larry.
Did your husband have a problem with anybody? Was anybody angry with him?
No. Absolutely not.
And as detectives continue to look for evidence, including the murder weapon and Larry's missing Jeep, they also delve into the private lives of Mr. and Mrs. Fenton.
Everyone really talked about what a fairy tale marriage they had.
Including Rebecca herself.
Perfect, blissful. I had the life.
But Sergeant Carrie Spaulding is skeptical.
It was something that just isn't even realistic in the best marriages, and not everything is a Cinderella story from the moment you wake up until the minute you go to sleep.
Learning what really went on behind closed doors wasn't going to be easy, though.
And that was a little bit of a stumbling point because Larry never confided in anyone that there were issues between him and Rebecca.
Rebecca tells detectives the couple largely kept to themselves.
We're very private. We're not socializers, really.
Mm-hmm.
But detectives would uncover a shocking secret as they looked into Rebecca's past. Learning that for 7 years she'd been a high-priced call girl, once arrested on prostitution charges. And Rebecca doesn't deny it.
So you admit to all of that?
Absolutely.
And you admit you were with an escort service?
Yes, it was.
Rebecca is also, surprisingly, unapologetic.
Was it the money?
It was the money, it was the excitement, it was the fancy restaurants, the places I got to travel to, the people that I was meeting. I think there was a warped sense of control in all of it.
But Rebecca says that doesn't make her a murderer.
One has nothing to do with the other.
Unless perhaps Larry had just learned about her past before he was shot dead, which Rebecca insists is not the case.
At what point did you confide in Larry and say, Larry, I've been an escort for 7 years?
It was right before we started talking marriage.
How did he take the news?
He looked at me and said, that's done and over with, that's behind you now. Is there anything about it that you still find attractive? And I said no, and I was done at that point. And we never looked back. We never talked about it again.
But it would still pique the curiosity of investigators.
That didn't really weigh as far as her guilt or innocence in this case. It just made us look more into her background.
They would learn that, sure enough, Rebecca and Larry were having problems, and she had become a bored Clearwater housewife.
At what point in your marriage did you become bored?
I'm going to say right after we tied the knot.
Right after?
I had too much time on my hands. I was so used to working and flying here and doing this and doing that and sort of having my own bank account and doing my own thing. I didn't know how to share. I had to learn how to be married. I remember feeling a little lost. I remember just kind of thinking, who am I now?
Investigators dig some more.
And then we started finding out about someone that she was romantically interested in.
A younger man named David, a prep chef at a Clearwater restaurant.
Was she interested, or were they having intimate relations?
I could never prove that she actually had intimate relations. Do I believe she did? Yes.
Sergeant Spaulding says she learned Rebecca and David had a secret meeting place.
They met at a hotel.
Yes.
But both David and Rebecca would insist to detectives that nothing happened between them.
Did you ever cheat on Larry?
No. No, I didn't.
Were you seeing anyone at the time of Larry's death?
No.
You didn't have a boyfriend?
No. I didn't have a boyfriend.
Rebecca does concede, however, that David was a close friend she found attractive.
We did not have an affair. There was no involvement between us. There was nothing sexual between us. It was a crush.
And detectives can only wonder if Rebecca's husband might have found out about David.
So, again, the only people who know what happened behind those doors are her.
And David.
And David.
Correct.
But they would develop a theory that Larry had fallen victim to a fatal love triangle.
I believe that Rebecca was probably telling David that she was going to leave Larry. I think David realized he's not going anywhere and he'd had enough, so he cut it off. And I really think that was her motivation, and that turned her into a tailspin.
Ending in her husband's murder.
At this point, did you feel like police were looking at you as a suspect?
I remember thinking to myself, what happened, and being real scared.
Detectives already suspected Rebecca Fenton had murdered her husband Larry when they interviewed her just hours after he was shot dead in their Clearwater, Florida home.
There's some questions here that aren't making sense to me.
They're not making sense to us either.
But they don't have a scrap of evidence until they locate Larry's missing Jeep Cherokee 2 days later, just a block away from their home. And what they find in the vehicle, or rather don't find, confirms their suspicions that Larry wasn't killed in any home invasion robbery. The only loot found in the abandoned Jeep is some costume jewelry, a jar of coins, Larry's iPod, and his laptop computer, leaving detectives asking themselves why any bandit wouldn't at least take off with that.
After having just committed an armed residential burglary, murder, grand theft auto, and walk away with actually no proceeds whatsoever.
But then investigators make what appears to be a sensational case-breaking discovery in another car. The one belonging to Rebecca, where they find the murder weapon, Larry's own gun, in a plastic bag under the front passenger seat.
With 5 spent casings in it, 5 shots were fired inside the house.
Inside the bag was also jewelry that Larry always wore. There was a key to the gun case and also keys to the Cherokee that had been missing.
And now the evidence overwhelmingly doesn't point to a burglar. It points to Rebecca as her husband's killer.
The suspect would have to enter the residence, go up the stairway, mysteriously find the gun that's hidden in a bedroom drawer, come back downstairs, kill Larry, and then ransack the apartment, steal odds and ends, and then move it all to the Cherokee, take the Cherokee, drive it around the block, and then abandon it.
before returning to the crime scene to plant the gun and other stolen articles in Rebecca's car.
It didn't make any sense.
Detectives believe they have Rebecca dead to rights.
Can you understand why the finger was pointed at you?
Absolutely.
They had also uncovered life insurance policies that added up to a lucrative motive.
If Larry tragically died or accidentally died, or if something else happened to him, then she got almost $500,000.
As well as Larry's estate.
If she inherits Larry's wealth, she stands to gain over $1 million.
Rebecca would eventually get most of the insurance money, but scoffs at the suggestion she killed her husband for it.
I loved Larry, and Larry would have done me a lot more good alive, financially, than dead.
Regardless, all detectives now need to arrest Rebecca are the results of the forensic tests conducted after she was first interviewed by detectives.
Cooperated with every test, gunshot residue, hair, fibers, clothing, everything the night that Larry was killed.
And cops are astonished when the results of the gun residue test come in.
That came up negative.
Yes, it did.
Despite that, detectives still believe Rebecca shot her husband.
She could have taken a shower, she could have washed her hands, she could have worn gloves, and she wouldn't have GSR on her hands.
But Rebecca would then also pass not one, but 3 polygraph tests, 2 of them administered by investigators and another conducted independently.
And they had to let me go.
And the case would go so cold, detectives wondered if they'd ever solve it. Until it unexpectedly gets red hot again at the very scene of the crime.
The home where Rebecca and Larry once lived used to sit on this lot right behind me. It was there until a few years after the murder, when it was mysteriously burned to the ground.
Putting the heat right back on Rebecca.
The house was torched.
Arson investigators finding evidence of fire accelerants.
Who do you believe did that?
I believe that if Rebecca didn't do it herself, she certainly arranged to have it done.
But Rebecca, who had gone broke and was in need of money, claimed she had nothing to gain from the fire, not even an insurance payout.
You're telling me here today you didn't burn that house
I would not
out.
have had a home to live in, and that home was in foreclosure. I would not have benefited from that house burning down financially, 1 iota.
But the fire was suspicious and high profile enough to get the attention of cold case investigators who had been assigned to re-examine her husband's murder.
The state really wanted some outside person to kind of corroborate all the evidence that we had collected from the scene and really bring this case together.
And ironically, it is Rebecca herself who leads detectives to just what they're looking for.
Rebecca calls 911, and she's reporting a domestic disturbance
with an unruly boyfriend named Alfred Nolan.
She wants the police to come because she wants this person removed.
And Nolan tells detectives something that makes them do a double take.
He told us about one time they were fighting, and she held a knife to his throat and said, "I'll kill you like I killed Larry."
Rebecca scoffs at it.
Did you do that?
No, that altercation never happened. Larry wasn't stabbed, he was shot.
Rebecca says Nolan is a career criminal, trying to buy himself a break on a charge that was about to send him back to prison for 10 to 15 years.
So you're saying the only reason why he came forward with this information is to try to help himself?
Absolutely. And they cut his charges for him.
Detective Michael Hasty doesn't deny Nolan had a credibility problem.
It's well chronicled that, Alfred Nolan, not a good guy, kind of a bad guy, criminal history, in and out of jails, in and out of prisons, all that's true.
But Detective Hasty says Nolan's allegation could be corroborated by other witnesses.
Despite all the knocks against him, is the fact that he had told other people about this before he even knew that police were even going to come ever talk to him.
Detectives believe they finally have enough evidence to charge Rebecca Fenton with the murder of her husband, Larry.
It really wasn't any one thing. If you took away one single piece of evidence, does the case fall apart? No, it doesn't rely on a single piece of evidence. It relied on everything that together was just overwhelmingly convincing of her guilt.
It includes this local TV news video of Rebecca laughing and smiling just moments after Larry was shot dead in their Clearwater, Florida home, and her 911 call.
Tell me if he was alive and I ran.
There are also crime scene photographs and her own words indicating Rebecca did nothing to help save her husband when she says she found him lying bloody and motionless in the foyer of their house. Then there are official documents showing Rebecca stood to make more than $1 million in inheritance and life insurance payouts from Larry's death. Plus, the testimony of a boyfriend who says Rebecca confessed to him that she'd killed Larry. And perhaps the most incriminating of all.
If I was to identify the single biggest mistake that she made, it was this one. The gun is found in her car.
Now, more than 6 years after her husband's murder, detectives bring Rebecca to the station one last time to finally wrap up their exhaustive investigation.
Rebecca, you're under arrest for the murder of Larry Fenton.
Rebecca says she couldn't believe it was happening.
I just didn't think that I was ever going to be arrested for something that was so heinous, that was such a loss to me.
But Rebecca also never thought a jury would convict her, or that she would ever be meeting Crime Watch Daily behind bars, where she is now less than 3 years into a life sentence for the first-degree murder of husband Larry.
How can you get somebody on premeditation when you can't put them at that crime scene or on that weapon?
And when we sit down, I ask her the big question.
Did you kill your husband?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't.
Why should people believe you?
Because the evidence, the lack of evidence, the lack of physical evidence.
But detectives are certain Rebecca did do it.
I absolutely know that Rebecca is the shooter and believe it based on the totality of the entire investigation, without a doubt.
I think Rebecca has told this lie so much that maybe she has talked herself into it. Rebecca genuinely is a sociopath. I really believe she thought she was going to get away with this.
Rebecca, now 50, claims she was tried and convicted by public opinion before she even got to court, thanks to that mysterious smile at the crime scene and her history as a call girl with an arrest for prostitution.
It was enough for a lot of the people in the community to think that I was a monster.
And Rebecca still insists a burglar murdered Larry.
I don't think that they went in intending to kill anybody. I think they came down the stairs and they had that gun in their hand, and I think somebody panicked.
Then framed her by planting the murder weapon in her car.
I want to be able to turn and tell people I'm not a monster. I'm not a monster.
But so far, Rebecca's appeals have been denied. And right now, it seems there is only one person in the world who believes she was wrongly convicted.
I think that this is a miscarriage of justice.
Andrew Tizard is a former investigator with the British Home Office in London, the equivalent of our FBI, and he tells Crime Watch Daily via Skype that he became convinced Rebecca was innocent after watching a TV report on her case.
As a result of that, I became concerned and I wrote to Rebecca Fenton.
Tizard says he's astounded Rebecca could be convicted on the strength of the evidence.
You need to be able to put the suspect at the scene of the crime. And one of the things which was apparent was that she was never placed at the scene of the crime.
He points to the fact she had no trace of gunshot residue on her, and there were no fingerprints on the murder weapon.
There is no evidence to suggest she ever pulled the trigger on the gun.
And he dismisses the significance of that mysterious smile at the crime scene.
Smiles can actually be very misinterpreted, something which is nervous.
But Tizard reserves his greatest criticism of the case for that testimony of career criminal Alfred Nolan, the boyfriend who claimed Rebecca threatened to kill him. Quote, just like she killed Larry, unquote.
I think there is no independent corroboration of these statements. They are all hearsay, so as such, I'm really surprised their admissibility in evidence, and it was taken so strongly.
The former top British cop also says he's actually coming to the U.S. to do all he can to set Rebecca free.
I will come out to see her to speak to her personally about how to take her case forward. I will pursue it as long as I can. through every means possible, and I will not give in until we find justice for both her and Larry.
And for Rebecca, who currently has no chance for parole, Andrew Tizard is her last and only hope of ever getting out of prison.
You come to terms and you may die here?
Yeah. Yeah, I know I'm going to.
Spending every single day wondering how this all happened.
I miss Larry. These interviews weren't difficult. They kick up a lot of pain, a lot of confusion. And then I got to go back to where my cell is. And, you know, relive it.